The small town of Millfield, Missouri wasn't accustomed to strangers. Nestled between rolling hills and dense forests, it was the kind of place where everyone knew each other's business before sunset. Church bells rang every Sunday, and neighbors brought casseroles when someone fell ill. Life moved with the predictable rhythm of seasons, until he arrived. No one could pinpoint exactly when the man in black first appeared. Some claimed they spotted him near the abandoned Crowley factory in early autumn, others swore they glimpsed him walking the cemetery perimeter since midsummer. What everyone agreed upon was his unsettling appearance, tall and unnaturally thin, with skin so pale it seemed translucent in certain light. His medium-length black hair never moved in the wind, as if painted onto his skull. He wore the same outfit regardless of weather, black shirt buttoned to the throat, black trousers, and black leather shoes that never seemed to collect dust despite his constant walking. But most disturbing were the sunglasses, obsidian lenses in thick black frames that concealed his eyes completely, worn day and night, rain or shine, as if whatever lay behind them was not meant for mortal viewing. Sheriff Miller had attempted to approach him twice, but the man had simply turned his head, that unnatural, too smooth movement, and kept walking without a word. Strange occurrences began after his appearances. Mrs. Henley's prized roses withered overnight. 3 healthy cattle from the Peterson farm were found bloodless in their pasture. Children reported nightmares about a man watching them from outside their windows. Most disturbing of all was that no one knew where he lived. In a town the size of Millfield, this was inconceivable. He simply existed there without belonging, appearing and disappearing like a recurring nightmare, always wearing those impenetrable black glasses, always silent, always watching. As weeks passed, theories evolved from reasonable to absurd to terrifying. No one could have predicted that Lily Evans would be the one to pierce this shroud of mystery. At 22, Lily was widely considered the most beautiful woman in Millfield, with cascading blonde hair that caught sunlight like spun gold and a figure that turned heads wherever she went. Old Man Evans, no one called him by his first name anymore, had raised Lily alone after her mother's death during childbirth, living in the small white house at the edge of town where Lily tended to him with devoted care. The kitchen of the Evans household filled with aromas that made Old Man Evans close his eyes in appreciation. Lily moved with practiced grace between stove and counter, her hands never idle as she prepared what she called the most important dinner of her life. Steam rose from pots of boiling pasta and simmering sauce. Fresh garlic and basil perfumed the air, mingling with the scent of baking bread. Outside, autumn wind rattled the windows, carrying with it the first bite of winter's approach. "He'll be here at 7, Lily said, her cheeks flushed from both excitement and the kitchen's heat. "I've never felt this way about anyone before, Papa. It's like he understands parts of me I didn't know existed." Old Man Evans watched his daughter with a mixture of joy and apprehension. In the 40 years he'd lived in Millfield, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about this situation raised alarm bells he couldn't silence. "You still haven't told me his name, Lily girl." He kept his tone casual as he arranged silverware on their best tablecloth. "Names aren't important," she replied with uncharacteristic firmness. "What matters is how we feel. He's different, special." The hollow knock at the door cut off their conversation. 3 distinct raps, evenly spaced, unnaturally precise. Lily's face transformed with radiant happiness as she hurriedly removed her apron. "He's here, remember your promise, Papa." She practically floated to the door while Old Man Evans remained rooted in place, a growing dread spreading through his chest. The door swung open, allowing a gust of cold air to infiltrate the warm house. Standing in the doorway was the stranger, the man in black, his sunglasses reflecting the warm light of their home without revealing anything behind them. As he entered their home, Old Man Evans felt an overwhelming sensation of wrongness, as if something fundamentally corrupt had crossed his threshold. The air seemed to grow stale. The lights dimmed slightly. Most disturbing was how the stranger moved, too smoothly, as if his feet weren't quite touching the ground. Lily served them with flourish, placing a heaping portion of pasta before the stranger first. "Here you go, sweetie," she said with such tenderness that Old Man Evans felt a stab of betrayal. The man simply stared at the plate through his black lenses, his pale lips parted slightly. An awkward silence descended as they began eating. Old Man Evans watched in growing horror as the stranger mechanically moved food to his mouth. Something was wrong with the way he ate, his jaw movements too regular, his swallowing too deliberate, as if he were performing actions he'd observed but never quite mastered. "So, Old Man Evans," broke the silence, forcing normalcy into his voice, "what brings you to our little town?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unanswered. The stranger continued eating, methodical and silent. "Do you have family around these parts?" Again, nothing. "You planning on staying long in Millfield?" His tone sharpened. "Papa, please," Lily interjected, her eyes pleading. "He doesn't like a lot of questions." "Doesn't like questions?" Old Man Evans set down his fork with a clatter. "That's convenient. Meanwhile, the whole town's been wondering for months who this fella is, where he lives, what he's doing here." The stranger slowly lifted his head but said nothing. A thin trickle of red sauce ran from the corner of his mouth down his pale chin. "All I know," Lily said defensively, "is that he's my sweetie pie, and that's all that matters." "Well, you're not my sweetie pie," Old Man Evans said, his patience evaporating, "and I'd like to know what my daughter is getting herself into." The stranger lifted another forkful of pasta to his mouth, chewing with that same mechanical precision. "If you can't say anything at all, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." His voice had dropped to a dangerous growl. "Please, no," Lily sobbed, her earlier joy shattered. "Leave him alone, Papa. Don't ruin this night for me. There's the door right over there," he pointed. "What are you waiting for?" The stranger suddenly raised his head fully. In one fluid motion, he took an enormous bite of spaghetti, leaned forward, and spat it directly into Old Man Evans' face. The food wasn't just expelled, it shot across the table with unnatural force and precision, striking the old man's face like a physical blow. What disturbed him most wasn't the assault itself, but the temperature of the food. It was ice cold, despite having come from a steaming plate. The stranger resumed eating immediately afterward, as if nothing had happened. Old Man Evans wiped the cold sauce from his face with shaking hands, a primal fear replacing his anger. This wasn't disrespect or rudeness, it was something else entirely, something wrong on a fundamental level he couldn't articulate. "I'm going to get my shotgun," he announced, standing abruptly and knocking his chair backward. "And when I get back, you better be gone, or you're going to be very sorry." Lily erupted into hysterical tears. "Please, no, no," she wailed, clutching at her father's sleeve as he moved past her. "Leave him alone or I'll never forgive you." Old Man Evans shook free of her grasp, storming from the dining room into the narrow hallway that led to his bedroom. His hands trembled as he retrieved the shotgun from the locked cabinet, a 12-gauge Remington that had belonged to his father. When he returned to the dining room, shotgun in hand, nothing had changed. The stranger continued eating methodically. "I told you to leave," Old Man Evans said. "Oh, I see, you don't think this is loaded." He aimed the shotgun at the ceiling and pulled the trigger. The blast was deafening in the small room, plaster dust raining down as the shot tore through the ceiling. Lily screamed, covering her ears. The stranger didn't flinch, didn't even pause in his mechanical chewing. With growing desperation, he circled the table until he stood directly beside the stranger. He pressed the barrel of the shotgun against the man's temple. "This is it, freak," he snarled, finger tensing on the trigger. "You're either going to walk out of here, or they'll have to put you in a bag and carry you out." Slowly, with that unnatural smoothness that defied human movement, the stranger turned his head against the pressure of the gun barrel. The black glasses faced Old Man Evans fully, and for a terrifying moment, the old man thought he saw something moving behind those impenetrable lenses, something that couldn't possibly be eyes. The stranger rose from his chair with fluid grace, then spoke for the first time, his voice neither high nor deep, but layered, as if multiple voices were speaking in perfect unison. "I'm from one of the hell worlds," the stranger said, each word precisely enunciated, "and I'm going to take your daughter there with me." The statement hung in the air like poison gas, robbing Old Man Evans of breath and thought. His finger froze on the trigger, muscles locked in shock. The shotgun suddenly felt like a child's toy in his hands, inadequate, ridiculous. The stranger moved past him as if the weapon were invisible, gliding rather than walking to where Lily stood. Her sobbing had stopped. She stood unnaturally still, eyes fixed on the stranger with an expression of terrible yearning. When he placed his arm around her shoulders, she didn't lean into the embrace but seemed to go rigid, as if electricity had passed through her body. "Lily," Old Man Evans managed to croak, the shotgun now hanging useless at his side. "Lily girl, don't." She turned to look at him, and Old Man Evans nearly dropped the weapon. His daughter's eyes had changed, the warm blue he'd known all her life now tinged with an oily blackness that seemed to swirl at the edges. "I love him, Papa," she said, her voice flat and distant. "I've always loved him, since before I was born." The stranger bent his head at an impossible angle and pressed his pale lips against Lily's forehead in a parody of affection. Then, together, they walked to the door and out into the night. "No!" he shouted, lurching forward. He burst through the door into the cold autumn night, shotgun still clutched in his hands. The moon was full, casting a sickly yellow light over the familiar landscape now rendered alien and threatening. In the distance, he could see them walking with that smooth, gliding motion that seemed to cover ground too quickly. Old Man Evans set off after them, his old legs protesting as he tried to run. The pursuit led him through familiar streets now transformed by moonlight and fear. He passed darkened houses where neighbors he'd known for decades slept, unaware of the horror unfolding outside their windows. They reached the edge of town, where paved roads gave way to dirt paths and the forest loomed dark and impenetrable. Old Man Evans realized with growing dread where they were headed, the old Crowley Cemetery, abandoned decades ago when the new memorial gardens had been established. The figures of Lily and the stranger grew more distinct as they approached the rusted gate of the cemetery. "Lily," he called, his voice swallowed by the night. "Lily, stop." He thought he saw her hesitate, her head turning slightly at the sound of his voice, but the stranger's grip tightened visibly around her shoulders, and they continued forward. They passed through the cemetery gates, which swung open without being touched, their ancient hinges suddenly silent. Old Man Evans reached the gates seconds later, only to find them inexplicably locked. Through the iron bars, he could see the stranger and Lily moving among the gravestones, heading toward the collapsed section at the far end of the cemetery. He watched in helpless horror as the stranger led his daughter toward a large, ornate tomb partially collapsed into the hillside. The moonlight caught Lily's golden hair one last time as they descended into the darkness of the exposed crypt. Then they were gone. Sheriff Miller organized a search party that combed the cemetery and surrounding woods. They found nothing, no evidence that anyone had been there, no underground passages, no disturbed graves except those already damaged by the hillside collapse years earlier. The tomb Old Man Evans had identified was empty, its stone sarcophagus intact and undisturbed beneath a layer of dust and cobwebs that looked decades old. "Are you sure this is where you saw them go?" Deputy Collins asked, shining his flashlight into corners that had already been thoroughly examined. "I know what I saw," Old Man Evans insisted, his voice still raw from shouting. The official search for Lily Evans continued for 3 weeks. Her photograph appeared in newspapers throughout the state. What they did find, during a thorough search of the Evans household, was troubling. In Lily's bedroom, investigators discovered dozens of drawings hidden between her mattress and box spring, crude, disturbing sketches of a thin figure in black, always wearing sunglasses, standing among flames or surrounded by twisted, inhuman shapes. More disturbing were the journals found in a locked box beneath her bed. Page after page described dreams of "my dark angel," coming to take her to the world below where I truly belong. The final entry, dated the morning of dinner, read simply, "Tonight he comes for me. I have prepared the meal as instructed. Papa will try to stop us, but nothing can prevent what was arranged before my birth. I go willingly to my true home." When Sheriff Miller showed these discoveries to Old Man Evans, the old man collapsed, hospitalized for what doctors diagnosed as a severe anxiety attack. The case of Lily Evans was eventually classified as a voluntary disappearance. For a time, Old Man Evans became something of a local curiosity, then an object of pity. He aged rapidly, his once robust frame becoming gaunt, his eyes sunken and constantly darting. Exactly 1 year after Lily's disappearance, Mrs. Henley was walking past the Wayfarer motel when she heard a gunshot. By the time authorities arrived, Old Man Evans was dead, not from the gunshot, which had shattered the motel window, but from what the coroner later determined was a massive heart attack. The true horror of what happened in Millfield lies not in the disappearances themselves, but in the town's collective amnesia, the way memories were altered, events forgotten, only to resurface when it was too late. After Old Man Evans' death, Sheriff Miller began noticing strange inconsistencies. Standing at the funeral, he caught a glimpse of a figure at the cemetery's edge, tall and thin, dressed entirely in black. As he approached, he found only a black rose with petals too cold to touch and a scent that made his head spin. That same day, Reverend Baker called in a panic about his daughter who had disappeared from college after writing about a man in black sunglasses appearing in her dreams. The sheriff called an emergency town meeting, sharing everything: Old Man Evans' account, Lily's journals, the black rose, and the new disappearance. What followed was a wave of confessions from terrified citizens. Mrs. Henley admitted that her roses had indeed withered overnight months ago. The Peterson family acknowledged losing 3 cattle under mysterious circumstances. Most disturbing was the pattern that emerged when records were examined. Every 25 years, dating back to the town's founding, a young woman had vanished from Millfield without explanation. Each disappearance followed reports of a strange figure seen walking the streets. Each missing woman had been known for her beauty, and each had lost her mother at birth. The connections had never been made before because the occurrences spanned generations, with enough time between them for memories to fade. Old Man Evans had died without answers, his desperate warnings dismissed as the ravings of a broken mind. In his final days, he'd scrawled a message on the motel room wall: "They forget. The town always forgets. When he returns, they won't remember any of this." Beneath these words was a crude drawing of sunglasses. For months, Millfield existed in a state of hypervigilance. But gradually, as often happens, vigilance faded. The man in black sunglasses became a local legend, a cautionary tale told to teenagers. 24 years later, a new family moved into the renovated Evans house. They had a beautiful baby daughter with golden hair, whose mother had tragically died during childbirth. And somewhere in Millfield, though no one immediately noticed, a thin figure in black sunglasses began to walk the streets at odd hours, watching and waiting.